I've always thought that writing a 1-minute short film is incredibly difficult. And then I watched this recent episode of The Bear where there was a scene that really made me realize that there are so many different ways that you can do this. In this episode, I'm going to break that down and talk about why I really loved it, and I'm going to set myself a bit of a challenge. Right, so the episode that I'm talking about is season 4, episode 6, at around 16 minutes and 13 seconds, to be precise. And it is a scene where Richie is having a phone call and leaving a message. Now, the great thing about this is that you don't have to have actually watched The Bear or know who this character is to appreciate this scene. I think so often when I'm trying to write short films or even just scenes, you feel like you've got to cram so much in and you feel like you've got to rush from the start to the end because there always needs to be a beginning, middle and end, right? But recently I was speaking to a mentor of mine who said, get in late, leave early. Meaning your audience isn't dumb. You don't always have to give them all the information. If you can drop them into the story at the right time with the right amount of information, they'll get it. And that is something that I think this scene does incredibly well. So to start off, we get 3 establishing shots with some soft, comforting music playing in the background. We then hear Richie's voice come in and it is immediately evident that he is on the phone and he's leaving a message. We don't need to see the phone ring, someone not answer, etc, etc. This is all done in one shot and from one angle. It's a close-up which really shows the emotion that he's feeling while he is making this phone call. Now getting into his monologue and what he says on the phone, this is where I think the words do the heavy lifting. He starts talking about how he feels like a rock, where he can't move, and that he feels like a rock over here, and they feel like a rock over there, and it's all a bit disjointed, but also oddly poetic, which is how I would really describe Richie now that I've watched so many seasons of him. The way he talks about being a rock over here shows us that he's lonely, but we also get a load of other information about him. He talks about remembering reading a story to his daughter. So right, we know that he has a daughter. He talks about a restaurant review. So right, we know that he works in a restaurant. And then he all of a sudden interrupts himself while he remembers the name of that book that he used to read to his daughter. Again, showing us that he is really disconnected and he can't think straight. All of this is happening so quickly, yet we are getting so much insight into who he is as a character. In the end, the call gets cut off because he's reached the limit of the voicemail, which makes him really annoyed and angry, but at the same time shows us that even though he's trying to communicate and be a good father, there's things that just keep getting in the way and keep knocking him down. Again, all of this happens in 1 minute, and I feel like it really does tell a bit of a story. And if I watch that as a standalone short film, I think it would be really brilliant. So watching that scene got me really inspired and made me want to write a 1-minute short film. Right, we're gonna give this a go. First things first, always open up Final Draft, which is the software that I use to write my scripts. And we say new, and we stare at a blank page with the blinking cursor. Ugh, I hate it when it does that. So let's get straight into it because we know that our location will be external to start out with, and it's in London because that's where I live, and it's during the day. Then I want to do the same thing that they did in The Bear, where you have a few establishing shots in the beginning so that we know where our scene is set. Of life moving in London. Cool, and then I also just want to indicate that there's going to be some slow music building in the background to give us an idea of what the tempo of the scene is going to be. Quite often those kind of notes aren't necessarily put into the first draft, but when it's something that conveys the emotion of how I want the reader to feel when they are first reading the script, it's always something that I want to include. Next, I really like how the audio of the scene came in before you actually saw the character. So I'm going to do it in a similar way, but instead of being a voicemail, I'm going to do it as something that we use a bit more frequently these days, WhatsApp voice notes. So I quite like it if that sound of the WhatsApp voice recording that we all know pops up before, because then I think our audience will immediately understand what is happening in the scene. Again, I'm making this pretty rough because I'm the one who's going to be filming this and editing it, so I don't need to give that much information. Okay, now we need a character. For something like this, where they're not necessarily going to say the character's name, you can just call them man or female or whoever's going to be acting in it. But I often quite like coming up with a name just because it's something fun to do that's creative. Or you can just get some help.
Sean, can you give me a male name? Jeff. Don't know if I like Jeff. Jeff feels a bit too like.
My name is Jeff.
Give me another one. Fred works. Thanks. Great, so we've got our location, we've got our character, so this means we don't have a blank page that's just staring at us. And this is the moment where I like to just pause and have a think about where the scene is going to go, or in this case, it's a short film. People always say that you should write from experience, write from what you know. So I was thinking about certain things that have happened in my life recently. One of them is a very close family friend sadly was on their deathbed for quite a while and ended up dying a few weeks ago. They were in hospital for about 4 months, and something that I found really challenging was knowing when to speak to them, when to go and visit them, how to ultimately say my goodbyes when they were getting close to the end. And I feel like this is something that a lot of people struggle with. You know, do you go and see that person in hospital when they might not remember you, and you're now going to remember them in a state that is not really how they would want to be remembered? So I feel like this is a human truth that often is explored in different series and different films, and could be something that would be quite nice to go into a WhatsApp voice note. So this is where our character Fred is grappling with that element of how to speak to them. And now I haven't really decided, is this before they've died, is this after they've died? Probably after they died has a bit more of an emotional punch to it. So yeah, I'm going to start with that and see where we go. I'm going to get my head down and start writing a bit of dialogue, and I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've got my first draft of it. Generally, they say that 1 page of script leads to 1 minute of screen time. So that's what I'm aiming for, is writing 1 page, which really is not a lot of space to try and get everything in. What I've done first is just write all the dialogue of what I would want my character to say, or what I think that they would say in a voice note. And then I will start to add in notes that, you know, hint to the pace of it, or anything that just helps the narrative of the story flow along. Again, usually when you're writing these, you have to be careful of not writing too many director's notes, which is leading the director into doing it a certain way. But because I'm going to be the director here, I don't mind doing that. In terms of storyline, I've chosen to write this about a grandfather because I was really close to mine, so it just makes me feel a bit more connected to the piece. So next, I'm just going to break up the dialogue with a few action notes. Something that's important here is just making sure that they're really short, sharp, and to the point. So for example, after we get the first little paragraph of dialogue, I want it to really be clear that this hurts for this guy to be saying this. And I don't need to fluff it up, I just need to say, this hurts. Okay, and then we change pace because he's now trying to push aside those sad emotions and recount a funny story that he and his grandpa would have remembered. We need to indicate that the pace changes here. And again, keeping it simple, he changes pace. And keeping to the whole thing of writing what you know, this little anecdote of when they were younger and his friend shat his pants while playing hide and seek in the garden is something that actually happened to a friend of mine while I was there. And now we really don't have much space or time left to get anything else in, but I do want it to come full circle and just really show that he is sorry for not communicating with his grandfather more, and he loves him and he's gonna miss him. So this gives us a little bit of a character arc for Fred, where he started the voice note feeling very guilty and very sad. He then regales a bit of a happy story, and then shows that love and that compassion for his grandfather, ultimately ending with maybe a little bit of closure. And finally, we could probably end it with something to help the audience with a bit more information. We could have that the voice note doesn't deliver, and you do see last seen 2 days ago, to really hit home the point that the grandfather has passed on. Might be needed, might not be needed. It's probably something that I'll shoot anyway, and then I'll decide in the edit whether I keep it in or not. But for a script, I think it's quite nice to add in at the end. Cool, and there we have 1 page. I'll probably read it through and time it just to make sure that it is around the minute mark. I'll also leave it for a bit, go and make a cup of tea, have some lunch, come back and read it again, and do that quite a few times to edit it and make sure I get it to a place that I'm really happy with. I'll probably go and watch that episode of The Bear again because I found it to be just such good inspiration. And then yeah, I'm gonna try and film this. My acting's not that great. If I can't find another actor to help me out, then I will probably just do it myself, and it won't be very good. But I do know a few actor friends, so I might see if they are willing to come around and shoot this. So yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed it. I mean, it's quite a somber topic and quite a deep piece for just a minute script, but it is really helpful writing what you know, because you can tap into those emotions that you have felt or you know that other people have been feeling. Please like, subscribe, and follow along for this journey. I'm going to try and get this made and put it out on my channel, but I've also got many other videos to come. See you soon.